Hello and welcome. So today we're taking a look at the additional cards that are coming in the upcoming update, I would say. These are being added to the Dawnbreak Nightedge expansion packs. So we have a legendary for each class and a gold for each class and 1 gold for neutral. At least that's how it appears so far with these 17 cards that are being added. So first up, we have the Forest Legendary Green Eel Axeman, which is a pretty nice looking card. It's a 7 cost 6/5 with an 8/7 evolve, which is pretty standard for the evolve stats, but it has the pretty keen ability of being a rush, which is good. Having the rush ability is always handy. And fanfare, give your leader the following effect: at the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to the enemy leader if at least 3 cards were played this turn. This effect lasts the rest of the match, which is fairly decent. So not a bad card overall, and I think it's definitely got some decent potential as a good late game control forest card. So hopefully we'll see some interesting decks pop up around this card. And then following that up, we have Stories Falconeer, a 2-drop 1/3 gold for Forest, which is a fanfare. Put a Skystride Raptor into your hand. If you haven't seen what the Skystride Raptor is, it is a 2/1 Storm, I believe. I'm pretty sure that's what it was statted as, which is still a fairly decent card and not bad overall. It does give Bane to all allied Starstride Raptors in your hand, so giving Bane to cards in your hand is still fairly decent as well. It's definitely not a perfect card. I would say it's sitting in the good range, definitely not the bad range or the really good range, just kind of in the middle there as a pretty standard kind of gold valued card. Then we get Spartacus, the 6-drop 4/5 for Sword, Legendary Commander. Fanfare, transform the Reaper at the bottom of your deck into a victory card. At the end of your turn, put 2 random officer followers from your deck into your hand. So this card, guys, I haven't looked at a lot of these cards, but this one piques my interest a lot. Being able to transform the Reaper into a victory card. That alone is absolutely crazy. I mean, you win the game if you deck out at this point, so any deck that is going to go for a long period of time, Sword, it doesn't tend to be the one to do it, but I reckon you could very, very easily build an interesting deck, and it gives spring cleaning an actual use, so I really want to check this card out, which should be really cool. Following that legendary, we actually have a gold 2/1, which isn't bad. I mean, a 2-drop 2/1 is fairly decent as a commander. If this follower can be targeted, your enemy can only target this follower, cannot be destroyed by spells and effects, can be destroyed by damage from effects or attacks. So it doesn't have the full spell and effects negation, it's only got a partial where it can still take damage, so any damaging spells will kill this fairly easily, which is good. I mean, that's a great thing, especially since it is an only targetable card, so it's pretty decent, I think, for a 2-drop, and being a commander definitely gives it some synergy with other commander type cards like Cannon and things like that, but I just don't know how to feel about it overall. Maybe this could work with Arthur. I believe Arthur should be able to pull this fairly easily, so it means you would only be able to target this card on its own, which is good, but we'll have to wait and see. It's like a pseudo ward, I guess you could say. Following that up immediately, we go into the 5-drop 4/5 legendary card. Fanfare, give your leader the following effect: at the end of your turn, if an allied follower is in play, perform Earthright. Give +2/+1 to a random allied follower. This effect lasts the rest of the match. So this is another leader effect. They're really pushing these leader effects onto other classes, which is nice to see. Having a nice variety of leader effects is good, and this one works well for Earthright, so I don't see any problem with that. It is a card that will only go off as long as you have an Earthright, so if you have 1 Earthright on board, you will get 1 boost. I believe that it's only perform Earthright once, which means if you have 2 Earthrights on the board, it won't trigger twice, I believe, looking at how this card works, unless you've obviously stacked this, in which case then it should work. But it's going to be a fairly interesting card, and I think it's got some potential to at least kind of throw things in the air for Earthright. Giving them more tools is always good, and more decent legendary tools that aren't massive columns that are really difficult to use sometimes is fairly decent. Then we have Burgeon Onion Patch Master. So I can't believe we got this card, honestly. I was only mentioning about this the other day, that we really need an onion card because onions are just funny cards. Anyway, it's a 7-drop 5/5 gold for Rune. It's fanfare, summon an onion patch, give your leader the following effect: whenever you play a spell, summon an onion patch. This ability is not stackable and lasts for the rest of the match. So you'd only need to run 1 of her, and you get this token onion patch, which is fairly interesting, I guess. So it's a 2-drop 1/1, not very strong, but infinite of them is fairly decent. Whenever this follower attacks, spell boost the cards in your hand. So definitely not the strongest card, probably just ended up being a full board clutter deck, but I definitely would love to at least test it. I think it's a really interesting art, and I think it could be at least some fun, even if it's not a competitive card. Kind of like the bunny cards, or unique bunnies, or whatever they are, that just spell boost upon last word. Similar kind of attribute. So this is a 2-drop 1/3 legendary for Dragoncraft. It's a fanfare. Put a White Frost Whisper into your hand. Evolve, deal 1 damage to the enemy follower. So we'll take a look at what a White Frost Whisper is somewhere, where clearly it's not there. Might be after the gold here. They don't put these in perfect order sometimes, and it's kind of frustrating when you're going through the cards and trying to look at, here it is. So, White Frost Whisper is a choose enemy follower and destroy it if it is already damaged. If it has not been damaged, deal 1 damage to it instead. So it kind of combos with the evolve effect of the card that generates this one. Being able to damage a card and then use this to finally finish it off is fairly decent. So it's definitely not a bad card. It's a low cost. It can be used in PDK decks. I think it's got at least some work to it. And I mean, dealing 1 damage isn't the best on an Evo, but like I said, it's a nice low cost legendary card and works well in something like PDK, I reckon. So nice to see. Then we have Dragonplate Warrior, 8-drop 7/7 gold. Ward, fanfare, give your leader the following effect. Whenever you play a non-follower card, deal 1 damage to the enemy leader. This effect lasts the rest of the match. And of course, this card having a ward is absolutely crazy. It's going to be able to block out a substantial amount of damage and give you a permanent damage to face effect. So it's kind of like PDK, but instead of being follower activated, it's non-follower activated. So could you imagine pulling this card off in a Lindworm deck where you're prioritizing, you know, just dealing non-follower cards and just playing them out? Sorry, well, non-dragon cards, but you know what I mean, going with that. Or however, just crazy. I mean, non-follower cards, absolutely massive. And yeah, Lindworm is non-follower. Similar to this. So, Lindworm support, definitely nice to see something decent. Dragonplate Warrior, I give it at least a good to great out of a card design perspective. I mean, an 8-drop 7/7, deal damage to face, can't go wrong. Then we have the token we covered, just because they're not in the right order there. Then we have the Shadowcraft legendary. So this is Arceus Ghostly Manager, 7-drop 6/6. They're probably taking cues from something like Catacomb by the looks of it with that kind of art, but that's fine. Fanfare, give your leader the following effect. Whenever you play a follower that originally cost 3 play points or less, destroy that follower and summon X ghosts. X equals the original cost of the destroyed follower. This effect is not stackable and lasts the rest of the match. Again, another leader effect. I believe that's what they're aiming for as a primary theme of this like mini expansion at the moment. So destroying a follower and summon X ghosts. Well, ghosts have storm, so you can guarantee getting damage out of it. The original follower has to cost 3 or less. So, I mean, at most you're getting 3 ghosts. I don't know how to feel about that. It does destroy the follower, which means you've got some potential to gain good amounts of shadows out of it, but outside of that, I'm just not sure what kind of deck I'd want to throw this in. Maybe a PTP kind of variant, but there's just better cards for that, so I'm just not sure where that is going at this point. Then we have the 2-drop Lord Deathskull 1/3. Last word, give a random allied follower. Last word, summon a skeleton. Kind of just a smaller catacomb. I mean, it only gives 1. And then, of course, the Evo gives an random allied follower a zombie. So I suppose it's nice and stackable with the Evo, but just not sure whether this card will be amazing or not. Definitely a good card, just don't think it's going to be amazing. Next up, the Bloodcraft legendary. So, Waltz, Knight of Wolves. This is kind of a lycanthrope theme, I guess. It's a 3-drop 3/2 legendary, so another low-cost legendary, which is nice to see. Fanfare, put a Blood Moon into your hand. Whenever an allied Blood Moon comes into play, evolve this follower. So basically a free Evo if you're playing this on turn. I believe it's, what's Blood Moon, a 2-drop amulet or a 3-drop amulet? I think it's a 2-drop amulet, so that would be a turn 5 card. So kind of filling in the slot that Belf played, sort of. So with Belf being on the out soon, it's not surprising that we're getting a card that kind of does a similar effect. Definitely not as good because 1, it takes up 2 slots initially, and 2, 3, it's not permanent, so Blood Moon's only a temporary kind of card, but it does add Blood Moon back into the game. After all, it will be rotating out next set, so Blood Moon gets to stick around, and we have some more Vengeance cards, which is always okay. I mean, don't know how to feel about this. As a legendary, I think it's weak. I think this could have probably been a gold over a legendary. I think the only thing really keeping it at legendary is the fact that it has the Evo when a Blood Moon is played, but outside of that, I just don't know if this card is good or not. Until we use it, it's going to be hard to say, or unless we get more big Vengeance card supports. Now onto the card I'm probably most excited for from this set, Raven, Evertide Vampire. So, if you know anything about Rage of Bahamut, where most of these cards originate from, Raven is actually Vania's sister, which for me was super interesting, and I really love that we're finally getting this as a card, and with the choice mechanic we get to see all the variants of Raven, which is really nice. So it's a 2-drop 1/1 gold, of course, Bloodcraft as mentioned. If you have at least 2 play points and Vengeance is active for you, choose, play this card as Raven, Noontide Vampire, or Raven Midnight Vampire. Fanfare, summon a Forest Bat. So the summon a Forest Bat is nice, it's actually a pretty decent effect, and the Noontide Vampire variant of Raven actually gives you, whenever an allied Forest Bat comes into play, restore 1 defense to your leader, so it gives you a small healing mechanic. But the better one, I think, is the Midnight Vampire, which is whenever an allied Forest Bat comes into play, deal 1 damage to an enemy leader. So basically a little weaker Vania in the sense that its stats aren't quite as good, and it is conditional. But being able to summon Forest Bats off this as well immediately without the Evo is great, and whenever having that whenever an allied Forest Bat comes into play effect is going to be decent. I think this has a lot of potential with the current Forest Bat cards that we have, and even without being a normal Vania, being able to just summon a Forest Bat is fairly decent. So I don't mind this as a card, and I can't wait to mess around with it. I'm definitely probably going to be creating 3 of these, so look out for a video where I include Raven very, very soon. It'll probably be one of the first few videos I mess around with. Then we have the Havencraft Legendary, which Tutankhamun is interesting, going the Egypt route, which is pretty cool. 6 drops 6/4, last word, if this follows defense was at least 2 before being destroyed, summon a Tutankhamun and set it to 1 defense. So a kind of can I survive for as long as I can card. Similar to what a lot of the cards are going for these days, basically being unkillable or resummoning themselves, which is not a bad thing. I definitely like seeing cards like this, but Haven finally gets their own variant, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad card, but it's going to be a harder one to get to work, especially since its defense is set at 1, meaning you'd have to use a pretty decent card to be able to raise it using, I forgot what it's called now, Aether, that's what I was thinking of. Aether would be a decent one to use with this card, because you could boost its token up, which would be okay. So 3-drop Amulet, White Fang Temple. Another interesting card. At the end of your turn, restore 1 defense to your leader. Whenever an effect restores defense to allies, subtract 1 from this amulet's countdown. Last word, summon a Holy Wing Dragon. So this is countdown 8. This is definitely a good Tenko Shire support, and it makes it more viable in rotation. If you have checked out my Tenko Shire video very recently, you'll see how good that deck actually is in Unlimited and how well it performs. I've been playing it a lot, and this actually has the last word effect of a Holy Wing Dragon, which is just straight out better than a few other cards. So there was Pegasus Sculpture, and I think this is actually going to be a little bit better. Countdown's a lot higher, but at the same time, Countdown basically is halved due to its own effect, and if you have more than one of these, it's going to be harder to use, but definitely a good card, and I would definitely love to give that a go as well. Then we have the Portal Legendary, Electro-Magical Rhino, so pretty interesting. A 7-drop 0/7 with the Evo, of course, full Evo stats. Rush, Fanfare, gain +0. X equals the number of remaining artifact cards in your deck. Whenever this follower attacks, put 3 artifact rhinos into your deck. So basically a pretty much unlimited source of artifacts, as the token is actually an artifact as well, which we will check that in a minute. It's basically got the exact same effect, minus the whole, actually it doesn't, it's just the same effect outright, I think, copy and pasted, except the token's an artifact, whereas the main card isn't. So yeah, this card, a lot of people have hyped this card up a little bit, at least from what I've seen around the place, whether it be Reddit, which isn't a great place, trust me, I don't like visiting Reddit as much as you guys, but I think this is a very average card. It's really high cost at 7. It basically clutters your deck with artifacts, which means unless you've already played Dez, this is going to be a hard card to take advantage of. And since it's Rush and not Storm, it's going to be even harder. Of course, the high cost stats is good, and the artifact cost can kind of be dropped with Excel and Dez on its own, but I feel like at most playing one of these in your deck could be okay. if you're looking for consistency, I don't know whether this card is the best. Definitely wouldn't want to play it until after you've already dropped Des onto the board, and that's basically the only time I would take advantage of it. In Take 2, on the other hand, this card is an absolute tank. I can see this card absolutely crushing in Take 2, especially as a portal card, so look out for that in Take 2 if you play that game mode at all. So crazy in that sense, but not so great in the normal sense. Then we have the gold card for Portal, which is the 5-drop spell. Choose, summon either a Lloyd Android or a Victoria, put a puppet into your hand, enhance 7, give the summoned follower +0, +3, and Bane. So if you know what these are, Lloyd of course is the ward that can only be targeted, and Victoria of course is fairly decent as well with a rush and preemptive attack, which is pretty good, and if it had a higher health total it could actually be really nice. But being a 5 cost, I think it's a nicely balanced out card, because I mean getting these 2 cards is a fairly decent amount of versatility, although I don't think you're going to be seeing it in many decks unless for some reason puppets suddenly take off, because this only really is good support for a puppet deck. I mean, it's kind of average support in an artifact deck because it means you don't have to actually use any other puppet cards for it, but I just don't know how to feel overall about this card. It's definitely not strong. I probably put it at the average mark, if that. Like most of these cards have been very average. Nothing too overpowered, nothing too underpowered, just kind of in that middle range, which isn't bad but isn't good at the same time. It'd be nice to see stuff on both ends of the spectrum sometimes, and while I don't like super overpowered cards, it's not bad to see at least 1 or 2 put in per set, or even per mini expansion. Seeing 1 would be nice. So the 7-drop Artifact Rhino, this is the token I mentioned before, which goes with, of course, the legendary Portal card. See, as I said, it's just an artifact with the exact same effect. There's nothing kind of important about this card outside of that. I mean, artifact trait's great, everything else is kind of average. And I think there's only 1 card. Whoops, sorry, went too far. Yeah, so we go from the Electromino to the gold neutral card. So the gold neutral card is one that I actually really love the art for. I think it has some amazing art, but it's a 4-drop 3/4. It's got a choose effect, which is nice. Fanfare, choose, put either a Ruthful Droplet or Ruthless Water Spout into your hand. So the Ruthful Droplet is of course a 1-drop spell that restores 2 defense to an ally, so a nice token for that sense. And Ruthless Water Spout is destroy an enemy follower with 4 defense or less for a 3-drop spell, so not bad at all. I think it's a nice card. It does add a little bit of healing and damage to any deck you want it in. Being a 4-drop with a 4/3 stat line is also fairly good. That's actually the perfect 4-drop stat line in my opinion. Being a 3/4 over a 4/3 is always much better. And this adds support to a lot of different decks. I mean, it's going to open up some definitely good healing for something like Haven, and it also is going to open up some good spells cards for something like Rune, and being able to kill a follower with 4 or less defense is fairly decent as well. So an all-round good card. I don't see it being bad. I don't know whether it will be ran just because there might be better cards in it, but it's definitely good. I don't have anything bad to say about this card. So hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. If you did, do hit that like button and subscribe. I do cover these card expansions every time we get them, so look forward to the next set, which will be launching at the end of next month. Definitely get keen for that. That's usually when we get it. We should know the title in the first week, and then we'll see card reveals very shortly after. So do look forward to that, and I'll catch you guys next time. See ya.